Since the launch of ChatGPT on November 30th, 2022, OpenAI has been the darling of the AI world, with its flagship product achieving verbification, reaching unfathomable levels of usage, and appeal across the consumer market as the first mainstream AI product. But what if I told you their head start in AI wasn't just eroding, but collapsing? Like a train crashing in slow motion, right before our eyes. I'm Boardroom Wire, let's jump into it. On October 31st, 2025, Sam Altman appeared in the BG2 Pod with Brad Gerstner and Satya Nadella titled All Things AI. Now, all things considered, this should have been a benign media appearance for Sam Altman. But things took a turn when Gerstner asked Sam a pointed question about OpenAI's astronomical spending commitments. Let's see what he said.
And hanging over the market is how can the company with 13 billion in revenues make 1.4 trillion of spend commitments? And you've heard the criticism,
First
Sam.
of all, we're doing well more revenue than that. Second of all, Brad, if you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer. If you I just enough. People are. I think there's a lot of people who would love to buy OpenAI shares. I don't think you would,
including myself. Including myself.
People who talk with a lot of breathless concern about our compute stuff or whatever that would be thrilled to buy shares. So I think we could sell, your shares or anybody else's to some of the people who are making the most noise on Twitter, whatever, about this very quickly.
Now, I wanted to show this video for a few reasons. First, this video was making the rounds on social media, and Altman's poor response was credited for potentially popping the AI bubble. Given Sam's status as CEO of OpenAI, it was pretty remarkable he didn't have a better pre-canned answer for what was, for all intents and purposes, a complete softball question by an existing investor and OpenAI bull in Brad Gerstner. With 1.4 trillion in capex spending commitments that they've announced publicly, Brad isn't the only one wondering this either. And with the poor response from Altman, this really spooked investors and created a ripple effect felt across the AI industry. And thanks to internal documents recently viewed by The Information, we now have the numbers that explain that panic. OpenAI's ambitious plans to grow revenue to $100 billion by 2029, or sooner, according to quotes by Altman, have led to a projected $14 billion in losses in 2026 alone, which basically suggests that the company's going to lose tens of billions of dollars annually for the foreseeable future. While high burn rates are nothing new when it comes to hypergrowth tech, this particular blend of ultra-high revenue growth and growing capital expenditures is something we haven't seen before. OpenAI's capex looks much more like an industrial business, but they are certainly getting the SaaS valuation. But the $14 billion loss isn't the only red flag. The bigger issue is the quality of the revenue they actually report. In forensic accounting, there's a concept called circularity, where money leaves a company, takes a trip around the block, and comes back as revenue. Take the Microsoft deal. It's not just a partnership, it's a closed loop. Microsoft injects billions, not as cash, but largely as compute credits. OpenAI spends those credits back on Microsoft Azure to run its models. Then OpenAI books revenue from enterprise customers, often sourced through Microsoft, and pays a revenue share back to Microsoft. It is vendor financing disguised as hypergrowth. And Microsoft isn't the only circular revenue partner. OpenAI has massive infrastructure deals with Oracle and CoreWeave and other strategic partners, putting a huge question mark next to its hypergrowth revenue claims. Now, last but definitely not least, competition in AI has also risen dramatically and is putting major pressure on OpenAI, who is currently fighting a three-front war. First, on the efficiency flank, they are being outmaneuvered by Anthropic. Anthropic's Claude family of models is already emerging as the preferred option for developers, but their capital efficiency is also far superior to OpenAI. OpenAI has raised a staggering amount of capital, over $60 billion in total commitments, to generate roughly $14 to $15 billion in annualized revenue. Anthropic, on the other hand, they've raised roughly half that amount at about $27 billion to build a business that is already closing in on a $8 billion run rate. Think about that velocity. In early 2024, Anthropic was barely at $1 billion. Now they are at $8 billion in revenue. They've effectively captured half of OpenAI's revenue scale with a third of the headcount and far less infrastructure bloat. They are proving that you don't need to burn as much cash like a utility company to compete at the frontier. And that's all before Nvidia and Microsoft also announced an additional investment of $10 and $5 billion respectively in a strategic partnership. OpenAI's next big competitor competing on the economic flank is Google. They are being absolutely suffocated by Google's economic scale. Unlike OpenAI, which has to pay the Nvidia tax for chips and the Microsoft tax for cloud, Google owns the entire vertical stack. They build their own TPUs, they own their own data centers, and in a long-term price war, the landlord always beats the tenant. And that's before you even start to count the advantages of Google search users and all of the rest of the Google suite that has billions of users. And finally, on the velocity flank, they're being blitzed by xAI. Elon Musk built the Colossus supercomputer in just 122 days, the timeline that made Microsoft's corporate bureaucracy look frozen in time. xAI isn't just building faster. They have real-time access to the X fire hose, while OpenAI is largely tracing on frozen history data and needs to rely on partnerships to acquire proprietary information. Anthropic, Google, and xAI are like the dark triad, creating a deadly strategic encirclement around OpenAI. OpenAI is priced like a monopoly, but they are competing against a leaner specialist, a vertically integrated sovereign in the technology space, and a speed-obsessed industrialist in Musk who already has a bone to pick with Altman. As things continue to unfold, OpenAI is looking less like the trillion-dollar behemoth that the big VC firms were underwriting several years ago, and it's looking more like a race to the bottom as this path is inevitably leading to commoditization. So ultimately, where does that leave OpenAI? They still have a lot going for them as the leader in consumer AI and the default option across the industry. But between the astronomical spending commitments, the shaky revenue, and increasing competition, only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more strategic breakdowns on business and technology. I'm Boardroom Wire. See you on the next one.